A young man only wanted to see his mother smile, no matter the cost of bringing food home. But his decision changed their lives forever. Get ready to be amazed by this story, but before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and attract 10 years of good luck. The bustling streets of downtown Boston echoed with the sounds of a typical Monday morning. Amidst the sea of hurried professionals and students, 17-year-old Ethan Reeves walked with his head down, his worn-out sneakers scuffing against the cracked sidewalk. The growl in his stomach was a painful reminder of the empty refrigerator waiting for him at home. Ethan's fingers instinctively brushed against the few coins in his pocket, all that remained of his mother's last paycheck. Sarah Reeves, a skilled seamstress, had been out of steady work for months. The economic downturn had hit their neighborhood hard, leaving many like them struggling to make ends meet. As he rounded the corner onto Haymarket Square, the vibrant colors and enticing aromas of the farmers' market assaulted his senses. Stalls overflowed with fresh produce, baked goods, and local delicacies. Ethan's mouth watered at the sight of plump tomatoes and crusty loaves of bread, luxuries that had become nothing more than distant memories in the Reeves household. He paused at a fruit stand, eyeing a particularly juicy apple. The vendor, a kind-faced elderly woman, caught his gaze and smiled. "Would you like one, dear? They're fresh from my orchard." Ethan's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "No, thank you, ma'am. I'm just looking." As he turned away, his stomach let out another rebellious growl, loud enough for nearby shoppers to hear. A few glanced his way with a mixture of pity and discomfort before quickly averting their eyes. Shame burned through Ethan as he quickened his pace, desperate to escape the temptation surrounding him. He had promised his mother he would head straight to the library after school to study, but the gnawing hunger had led him astray. Lost in thought, Ethan barely registered the shout behind him. "Hey, you! Stop right there!" Heart pounding, he whirled around to find Mr. Callahan, owner of the largest produce stand in the market, striding towards him with a thunderous expression. Ethan's mind raced, confusion and panic setting in as he racked his brain, trying to understand what he could have done wrong. "Empty your pockets, boy," Mr. Callahan demanded, his voice gruff and accusing. I don't understand," Ethan stammered, his hands shaking as he turned out his empty pockets, revealing nothing but the meager coins and a crumpled homework assignment. Mr. Callahan's eyes narrowed, unconvinced. "Your backpack. Open it." With trembling fingers, Ethan unzipped his backpack. To his horror, nestled among his textbooks was a shiny red apple, the same one he had been admiring just moments ago. I wouldn't. Ethan's voice cracked as he stared at the fruit in disbelief. How had it gotten there? Had his desperation driven him to unconsciously take it? Mr. Callahan's expression softened slightly at the genuine shock on the boy's face. "Come with me," he said, his tone less harsh but still firm. Ethan followed him to the back of the produce stand, his mind a whirlwind of fear and confusion. What would happen now? Would he be arrested? How could he face his mother? To his surprise, Mr. Callahan didn't immediately call the police. Instead, he studied Ethan with a calculating look. "You're Sarah Reeves' boy, aren't you?" he asked, recognition dawning in his eyes. Ethan nodded mutely, a lump forming in his throat. "I remember your mother. Fine seamstress. Helped my wife alter her wedding dress years ago." Mr. Callahan's voice took on a conspiratorial tone. "Listen, boy. I'm willing to overlook this incident. But nothing comes for free in this world. You'll work it off." Relief washed over Ethan, quickly followed by suspicion. "Work it off? How?" Mr. Callahan leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I've got some extra business on the side. Nothing too complicated. Just moving some packages here and there. Do that for me, and we'll call it even. Hell, I'll even throw in some extra cash for you and your mother." Ethan's blood ran cold as the implication of Mr. Callahan's words sank in. The offer was tempting, a quick solution to their financial woes. But the thought of his mother's disappointment, the years she had spent instilling values of honesty and integrity in him, held him back. I can't," Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry for taking the apple. I'll work here, at the stand, to pay it off. But I can't do anything illegal." Mr. Callahan's expression hardened. You sure about that, boy? This isn't an offer I make lightly. Once you walk away, there's no coming back. Ethan straightened his shoulders, finding a reserve of strength he didn't know he possessed. I'm sure, sir. I'll face the consequences of my actions, but I won't compound one mistake with another. For a long moment, Mr. Callahan stared at him, his expression unreadable. Then, unexpectedly, a small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Your mother raised you right, it seems. All right then, you start tomorrow. 6 a.m. sharp. Don't be late. As Ethan left the market, the weight of the day's events pressed heavily upon him. He dreaded the conversation he would have to have with his mother, but a small spark of hope flickered in his chest. He had been offered a chance, not an easy one, but an honest one. It was up to him now to make the most of it. With renewed determination, Ethan set off towards home. The path ahead would be difficult, but he was ready to face it head-on. Little did he know, this day would mark the beginning of a journey that would change his life forever. The walk home felt longer than usual as Ethan's mind raced with thoughts of how to explain the day's events to his mother. The sun was setting over Boston, casting long shadows across the weathered buildings of their neighborhood. As he approached their small apartment, he could see the warm glow of light from the window. His mother was already home. Taking a deep breath, Ethan pushed open the creaky door. The familiar scent of fabric softener and his mother's homemade potpourri enveloped him. Sarah Reeves sat at their tiny kitchen table, her sewing machine whirring softly as she worked on what looked like a dress alteration. Ethan, she called out, looking up from her work. The smile on her face faded as she took in her son's troubled expression. What's wrong, sweetheart? Ethan's resolve crumbled at the sight of his mother's concerned face. The events of the day came pouring out in a rush of words, the hunger, the temptation at the market, the apple in his backpack, and Mr. Callahan's offer. Sarah listened quietly, her face a mix of emotions, worry, disappointment, and above all, love. When Ethan finished, silence hung heavy in the small apartment. He braced himself for anger or punishment, but instead, Sarah stood up and wrapped her arms around him in a tight embrace. Oh, Ethan, she sighed, her voice thick with emotion. I'm so sorry you've been carrying this burden. We'll get through this together, I promise. Ethan felt tears prick at his eyes, overwhelmed by his mother's unconditional support. You're not mad at me? Sarah pulled back, cupping his face in her hands. I'm not happy about what happened, but I'm proud of you for being honest with me and for making the right choice with Mr. Callahan. That took real courage. They sat down at the table, and Sarah poured them both cups of chamomile tea, a luxury she reserved for difficult conversations. Now, let's figure out how we're going to handle this situation. Over the next hour, they talked through their options. Sarah insisted on accompanying Ethan to the market the next morning to speak with Mr. Callahan herself. They also agreed that Ethan would take on the job at the market stand, working before and after school to pay off his debt. But what about your studies? Sarah asked, concern evident in her voice. You can't fall behind, especially not in your senior year. Ethan squared his shoulders, determination shining in his eyes. I'll manage, Mom. I'll study during lunch breaks and stay up later if I have to. This is my responsibility, and I'm going to see it through. Sarah reached across the table, squeezing his hand. We'll do this together. I'll see if I can pick up some extra alterations work. Between the two of us, we'll make it work. As they cleared the table and prepared for bed, Ethan felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The road ahead would be challenging, but with his mother by his side, he felt ready to face whatever came their way. The next morning arrived all too quickly. Ethan and Sarah made their way to Haymarket Square, the pre-dawn chill nipping at their faces. Mr. Callahan was already there, setting up his stand for the day. Mr. Callahan, Sarah called out, her voice steady and dignified despite the circumstances. I'm Sarah Reeves, Ethan's mother. I believe we need to talk. The produce vendor looked up, surprise flickering across his face before he schooled his expression into a neutral mask. Mrs. Reeves, it's been a while. I suppose it has. For the next 20 minutes, Sarah negotiated with Mr. Callahan, her years of handling difficult clients evident in her composed demeanor. By the end of the conversation, they had reached an agreement. Ethan would work at the stand for 3 months to pay off his debt, with the possibility of continued employment if he proved reliable. As Mr. Callahan walked away to continue his setup, Sarah turned to Ethan. "Remember, sweetheart, this is a chance to prove yourself. Work hard, stay honest, and learn from this experience." Ethan nodded, a mixture of nervousness and determination churning in his stomach. "I will, Mom. I promise I won't let you down." With a final hug, Sarah left for her own job, and Ethan rolled up his sleeves, ready to begin his first day of work. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity for Ethan. He would rise before dawn to help set up the market stand, rush to school for a full day of classes, then return to the market for the evening shift. His nights were filled with homework and studying, often stretching into the early hours of the morning. Despite the grueling schedule, Ethan found himself enjoying the work more than he expected. Mr. Callahan, though gruff, proved to be a fair employer and a fountain of knowledge about produce and business operations. Ethan absorbed everything he could, from how to select the ripest fruits to the intricacies of supply and demand. At school, Ethan's teachers noticed a change in him. The once quiet student began to participate more in class discussions, drawing on his new real-world experiences to contribute unique perspectives. His grades, which had been slipping due to the stress of their financial situation, began to improve. Sarah, too, found renewed energy in her work. Inspired by her son's dedication, she reached out to old clients and sought new opportunities. Slowly but surely, her seamstress business began to pick up. As the weeks turned into months, the Reeves household saw small but significant improvements. The refrigerator was no longer empty, and Sarah even managed to set aside a small emergency fund. Ethan's debt to Mr. Callahan was paid off, but he chose to continue working at the market, recognizing the value of the experience and the steady income. One evening, as Ethan and Sarah sat down to a simple but satisfying dinner, Sarah reached across the table and took her son's hand. "I'm so proud of you, Ethan. You've grown so much these past few months." Ethan smiled, a warm feeling spreading through his chest. "I couldn't have done it without you, Mom. We're a team, remember?" As they cleared the dishes together, Ethan felt a sense of hope he hadn't experienced in years. The challenges they'd faced had been difficult, but they'd emerged stronger for it. With renewed determination, he looked towards the future, ready to tackle whatever came next, together. As summer faded into autumn, Ethan found himself settling into a new rhythm. The early morning chill at the market was now accompanied by the crunch of fallen leaves underfoot, and the produce stands were bursting with the colors of the harvest season. Despite the long hours and hard work, Ethan felt a sense of purpose he'd never experienced before. One crisp Saturday morning, as Ethan was arranging a display of pumpkins, he overheard a conversation that would change the course of his life. "I'm telling you, Jack, we need more people like you in the system," a woman's voice said earnestly. "Kids from troubled backgrounds need advocates who understand their struggles." Ethan glanced over to see Mr. Callahan talking with a well-dressed woman he didn't recognize. Curiosity piqued, he edged closer, pretending to adjust some nearby squash. "I appreciate that, Judge Martinez," Mr. Callahan replied, his usual gruff tone softened with respect. "But at my age, going back to school for a law degree seems like a pipe dream." Judge Martinez, Ethan's ears perked up at the title, shook her head firmly. "It's never too late, Jack. The juvenile justice system needs people with real-life experience, not just book smarts. Your background in business, your connection to the community, that's invaluable." As they continued their discussion, Ethan's mind raced. He'd never considered a career in law before, but something about the judge's words resonated deeply with him. The idea of being able to help kids who were struggling, just as he had been, stirred something in his heart. Later that day, during a lull in customers, Ethan gathered the courage to approach Mr. Callahan. "Sir, I couldn't help overhearing earlier, about the law program." Mr. Callahan raised an eyebrow. "Eavesdropping now, are we?" Ethan felt his cheeks flush. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. It's just, it got me thinking. Do you think someone like me could ever become a lawyer?" To Ethan's surprise, Mr. Callahan's expression softened. Someone like you? You mean someone who's faced adversity and chosen to better themselves instead of taking the easy way out? Someone who shows up every day, works hard, and never complains. He paused, looking Ethan square in the eye. That's exactly the kind of person who should become a lawyer. Encouraged by Mr. Callahan's words, Ethan threw himself into his studies with renewed vigor. He began to see his classes not just as obligations, but as stepping stones towards a greater goal. His English essays became exercises in constructing arguments, his history lessons a chance to understand the evolution of justice and society. At home, Sarah noticed the change in her son. "You're positively glowing these days," she remarked one evening as they shared a pot of tea. "What's got you so excited?" Ethan took a deep breath, suddenly nervous. "Mom, I've been thinking. I want to become a lawyer." Sarah's eyes widened in surprise, then crinkled with pride. "Oh, Ethan, that's wonderful. But it's a long, expensive road. Are you sure this is what you want?" "I've never been more sure of anything," Ethan replied, his voice steady with conviction. "I want to help people, Mom. People like us, who've struggled and need someone in their corner." Sarah reached across the table, squeezing her son's hand. "Then we'll figure it out together. It won't be easy, but if anyone can do it, it's you." Over the next few months, Ethan's life became a whirlwind of activity. He continued his work at the market, but now every spare moment was devoted to preparing for his future. He researched law schools, pored over SAT prep books borrowed from the library, and even started volunteering at a local community center to gain more experience working with at-risk youth. Mr. Callahan, seeing Ethan's determination, took him under his wing. He introduced Ethan to local business owners and community leaders, helping him build a network of support. "In this world, kid," he'd say, "it's not just what you know, but who you know that can make all the difference." One day, as Ethan was helping close up the stand, Mr. Callahan handed him a business card. "Judge Martinez is holding a youth court session next week. I told her about you, and she said you could sit in and observe if you're interested." Ethan's eyes lit up as he took the card reverently. "Really? Mr. Callahan, I don't know how to thank you." The older man waved off his gratitude. "Just promise me you'll use that big brain of yours to do some good in the world." The youth court session was a revelation for Ethan. Watching Judge Martinez in action, he saw firsthand how the law could be a tool for rehabilitation and second chances, not just punishment. He observed how she spoke to the young offenders, firm but compassionate, always looking for ways to guide them towards a better path. After the session, Judge Martinez took a few minutes to speak with Ethan. Her words of encouragement and advice further cemented his resolve to pursue a legal career. As winter settled over Boston, Ethan's hard work began to pay off. His grades were the best they'd ever been, and his SAT scores came back impressively high. With Sarah's help, he began the daunting process of college applications, setting his sights on schools with strong pre-law programs. The future that had once seemed so bleak now shimmered with possibility. There were still challenges ahead, financial aid forms to navigate, scholarships to apply for, and years of hard study looming on the horizon. But as Ethan looked back on how far he'd come, he felt ready to face whatever lay ahead. One snowy evening, as he and Sarah hung Christmas lights in their small apartment, Ethan paused, overcome with emotion. "Mom," he said softly, "thank you. For everything. For believing in me, even when I didn't believe in myself." Sarah pulled him into a tight hug, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Oh, my boy," she whispered, "you've always had greatness in you. I'm just glad the rest of the world is finally going to see it too." As they stood there, bathed in the warm glow of the twinkling lights, Ethan felt a profound sense of gratitude. The path ahead might be challenging, but with determination, hard work, and the unwavering support of his mother, he knew he could achieve his dreams. The seeds of change had been planted, and Ethan was ready to watch them grow. The spring of Ethan's senior year arrived with a flurry of activity. As cherry blossoms bloomed across Boston Common, Ethan found his mailbox flooded with college decision letters. Each envelope represented a possible future, a path forward that seemed unimaginable just a year ago. With trembling hands, Ethan and Sarah sat at their kitchen table one Saturday morning, a stack of unopened envelopes before them. "Whatever these say," Sarah said, squeezing her son's hand, "I want you to know how proud I am of you. You've already achieved so much." Ethan nodded, taking a deep breath before reaching for the first envelope. One by one, they opened the letters, creating two piles, acceptances and rejections. To their amazement, the acceptance pile grew steadily larger. Boston University, Northeastern, UMass Amherst, Ethan had been accepted to all of them. But it was the last letter that made his heart skip a beat. The Harvard University crest stared back at him from the envelope. "I can't open it," Ethan whispered, his voice shaky. "Mom, you do it." Sarah took the envelope, her own hands trembling slightly. She carefully tore it open and unfolded the letter inside. Her eyes scanned the page, and then she looked up at Ethan, her face breaking into a wide smile. "You did it, sweetheart. You got in." The kitchen erupted in joyous celebration. Ethan couldn't believe it. Harvard Law School had always seemed like an impossible dream, and now it was within reach. As the initial euphoria subsided, reality began to set in. Harvard was incredibly expensive, and even with financial aid, it would be a struggle. Over the next few weeks, Ethan threw himself into researching scholarships and financial aid options. He met with his school counselor, reached out to local community organizations, and even had a long conversation with Judge Martinez about potential opportunities in the legal field. Meanwhile, life at the market continued. As Ethan helped Mr. Callahan set up the stand one morning, he shared his dilemma. "I don't know what to do, Mr. Callahan. Harvard is my dream school, but the cost. I'm not sure if it's worth putting that kind of financial strain on my mom and me." Mr. Callahan listened thoughtfully, then said, "Ethan, opportunities like this don't come along every day. But you're right to consider the practical side too. Have you thought about deferring for a year? Work full-time, save up some money?" The idea hadn't occurred to Ethan, and it planted a seed in his mind. When he discussed it with Sarah later that evening, she agreed it was worth considering. "A gap year could give you time to save money and gain more experience," she mused. "And I could use that time to build up my business more." As decision day loomed closer, Ethan found himself at a crossroads. The pressure to make the right choice weighed heavily on him. One afternoon, feeling overwhelmed, he decided to take a walk to clear his head. His feet carried him to the Boston Public Garden, where he found a quiet bench overlooking the lagoon. As he sat there, watching the swan boats glide across the water, a voice interrupted his thoughts. "Mind if I join you?" Ethan looked up to see Judge Martinez standing there, a gentle smile on her face. He nodded, making room on the bench. "Mr. Callahan mentioned you were having a hard time deciding," she said, settling beside him. "Want to talk about it?" Ethan found himself pouring out his concerns, the opportunity Harvard presented, the financial strain it would cause, his idea of taking a gap year, and his fear of making the wrong choice. Judge Martinez listened patiently, then said, "Ethan, there's rarely a perfect choice in life. Each path has its own challenges and rewards. What matters is what you do with the opportunity you choose." She paused, looking out over the water. "Taking a gap year doesn't mean you're giving up on your dreams. It might even make you more prepared when you do start college. And if you decide to go straight to Harvard, there are always ways to make it work if you're determined enough." Her words resonated with Ethan, helping to clarify his thoughts. "How did you know you wanted to be a judge?" he asked. Judge Martinez smiled. "I didn't, at first. I just knew I wanted to make a difference. The specifics came later, as I gained more experience and understood where I could have the most impact." As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the garden, Ethan felt a sense of calm settle over him. He still had a difficult decision to make, but he now felt better equipped to make it. The next few days were a whirlwind of discussions, pro-con lists, and soul-searching. Ethan spoke with his mother, Mr. Callahan, his teachers, and even reached out to current Harvard students for their perspectives. Finally, the night before the decision deadline, Ethan made his choice. Gathering his mother, Mr. Callahan, and Judge Martinez in their small living room, he took a deep breath and announced, "I've decided to accept Harvard's offer, but defer for a year." A mixture of emotions played across the faces of his supporters: pride, excitement, and a touch of concern. Ethan continued, his voice growing stronger as he spoke. "This year, I'll work full-time at the market and take on some extra jobs to save money. I'll also volunteer with the youth court program to gain more experience. Mom can focus on growing her business without worrying about my immediate college expenses." Sarah's eyes shimmered with tears of pride. "Oh, Ethan. That sounds like a wonderful plan." Mr. Callahan clapped him on the shoulder. "Smart choice, kid. You'll hit the ground running when you start at Harvard." Judge Martinez nodded approvingly. "And the youth court will be lucky to have you. I'll make sure you get a comprehensive experience." As the impromptu celebration continued around him, Ethan felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The path ahead was still challenging, but he felt ready to face it. He had a plan, a support system, and a year to prepare himself for the rigors of Harvard. Looking around at the people who had believed in him, guided him, and supported him, Ethan realized that his journey was about more than just personal success. It was about building a foundation that would allow him to give back, to help others who faced the same struggles he had overcome. With renewed determination, Ethan embraced the future that lay before him, ready to make the most of every opportunity and challenge that came his way. The gap year stretched before Ethan like an uncharted territory, full of potential and possibility. As the lazy days of summer settled over Boston, he threw himself into his new routine with characteristic determination. Mornings at the market took on a new intensity as Mr. Callahan began teaching Ethan more about the business side of operations. "If you're going to be a hotshot lawyer someday," he'd say with a gruff chuckle, "you need to understand how the real world works." Ethan absorbed everything like a sponge, from negotiating with suppliers to managing inventory and handling customer complaints. He started to see how the skills he was learning could translate to a future legal career. In the afternoons, Ethan volunteered with the youth court program under Judge Martinez's guidance. Here, he encountered teens from all walks of life, many facing challenges similar to those he had overcome. He listened to their stories, helped them navigate the complexities of the legal system, and slowly began to find his voice as an advocate. One case particularly touched Ethan. A 16-year-old boy named Miguel had been caught shoplifting food, much like Ethan had once done. Instead of seeing a delinquent, Ethan recognized the desperation in Miguel's eyes. Working closely with Judge Martinez, Ethan helped develop a rehabilitation plan for Miguel that included job training and mentorship. "You see, Ethan," Judge Martinez explained, "sometimes the law needs to be a tool for second chances, not just punishment." As autumn painted the city in vibrant hues, Sarah's seamstress business began to flourish. With Ethan's encouragement, she had started offering custom-designed pieces alongside her alteration services. Her unique creations quickly gained a loyal following in the neighborhood. One crisp October evening, as they shared a homemade meal, Sarah reached across the table and squeezed Ethan's hand. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. Look how far we've come." Ethan smiled, his heart full. "We did it together, Mom. And this is just the beginning." As winter descended upon Boston, Ethan found himself facing new challenges. The market was less busy during the cold months, and he had to find creative ways to supplement his income. He started offering tutoring services to high school students preparing for their SATs, drawing on his own recent experience. The extra work meant long hours and late nights, but Ethan was buoyed by the progress he was making towards his savings goal for Harvard. Each dollar saved felt like another step closer to his dream. During this time, Ethan also began to forge deeper connections within his community. He joined a local youth leadership program, where he met other ambitious young people from diverse backgrounds. Together, they organized community service projects and engaged in passionate discussions about social justice and civic responsibility. It was through this program that Ethan met Zoe, a vivacious aspiring journalist with a keen interest in social issues. They bonded over their shared passion for making a difference, and soon found themselves spending more and more time together. As spring breathed new life into the city, Ethan and Zoe's friendship blossomed into something more. Their first date was a picnic in the public garden, where they talked for hours about their dreams and aspirations. "I want to tell stories that matter," Zoe said, her eyes shining with conviction. "Stories that can change people's perspectives and inspire action." Ethan nodded, understanding completely. "That's how I feel about the law. It's not just about rules and regulations, it's about protecting people's rights and ensuring justice." As the gap year progressed, Ethan found himself growing in ways he hadn't anticipated. His experiences at the market, in youth court, and within his community were shaping his worldview and strengthening his resolve to pursue a career in law. One sunny afternoon in late spring, as Ethan was helping Mr. Callahan close up the market stand, his mentor fixed him with a thoughtful look. "You know, kid," he said, "when you first started working here, I wasn't sure you'd stick it out. But you've proven me wrong. You've got grit, and that'll take you far in life." Ethan felt a warmth spread through his chest at the praise. "Thank you, Mr. Callahan. For everything you've taught me." Mr. Callahan waved off the gratitude with a gruff gesture, but Ethan could see the pride in his eyes. "Just remember where you came from when you're up there with all those Harvard bigwigs. And don't forget to visit an old man once in a while." As summer approached once again, marking the end of his gap year, Ethan found himself reflecting on the tremendous growth he'd experienced. He had saved a substantial amount for his education, gained valuable work experience, and developed a deeper understanding of his community and the law. More than that, he had discovered strengths within himself he never knew existed. The boy who had once felt trapped by circumstances was now a young man ready to take on the world. One warm evening, Ethan took a solitary walk through his neighborhood. The streets that had once seemed limiting now felt full of possibility. He passed the market where his journey had begun, the community center where he'd volunteered, and a small park where he and Zoe had shared their first kiss. Each landmark was a reminder of how far he'd come and the people who had supported him along the way: his mother's unwavering love, Mr. Callahan's gruff guidance, Judge Martinez's mentorship, and Zoe's inspiring passion. As he rounded the corner to his apartment building, Ethan felt a surge of excitement for the future that awaited him at Harvard. But more than that, he felt a deep sense of gratitude for the year that had just passed, a year that had transformed him from a boy running from his mistakes into a young man ready to face any challenge that came his way. Climbing the stairs to the apartment he shared with his mother, Ethan realized that while Harvard would open new doors for him, the real journey of growth and self-discovery had already begun. And no matter where his path led, he would always carry with him the lessons, love, and strength he had found during this transformative year. The late summer sun cast a golden glow over Harvard Yard as Ethan Reeves stood before the imposing gates, his heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. The weight of his duffel bag on his shoulder served as a tangible reminder of the journey that had brought him to this moment. "You ready for this?" Sarah asked, giving her son's hand a gentle squeeze. Ethan took a deep breath, drinking in the scene before him, the historic buildings, the bustling students, the promise of new beginnings. "As ready as I'll ever be," he replied with a small smile. The dorm room was smaller than Ethan had imagined, but as he and Sarah unpacked his belongings, it slowly began to feel like home. Photos of his mother, Mr. Callahan, and Zoe found their place on the desk, while the handmade quilt Sarah had sewn for him added a touch of warmth to the standard-issue bed. As they worked, Ethan's roommate arrived, a lanky, bespectacled young man named Alex from California. The two boys exchanged awkward hellos, each sizing up the person they'd be sharing close quarters with for the next year. When it came time for Sarah to leave, Ethan felt a sudden pang of homesickness. "I'm going to miss you, Mom," he said, pulling her into a tight hug. Sarah's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I'm going to miss you too, sweetheart. But I'm so proud of you. You've worked so hard for this." As Ethan watched his mother's retreating figure, he felt a mix of emotions wash over him. The safety net of his familiar world was gone, replaced by the vast unknown of college life. The first few weeks at Harvard were a whirlwind of activity. Ethan threw himself into his studies with the same determination that had gotten him there. His pre-law courses were challenging, but he found that his experiences from the gap year gave him a unique perspective that many of his classmates lacked. In his constitutional law class, Professor Abernathy posed a question about the rights of juvenile offenders. Ethan's hand shot up, surprising even himself. "Mr. Reeves," the professor acknowledged. Ethan cleared his throat. "While the law provides certain protections for minors, I've seen firsthand how the system can still fail them. During my work with the youth court program in Boston, I encountered cases where..." As Ethan spoke, drawing on his real-world experiences, he noticed his classmates listening intently. Even Professor Abernathy seemed impressed. "Excellent points, Mr. Reeves. It's refreshing to hear a perspective grounded in practical experience." That moment marked a turning point for Ethan. He realized that his background, which he had once seen as a disadvantage, could actually be a strength in his legal studies. As the semester progressed, Ethan found himself forming new friendships. There was Lily, a brilliant international student from Hong Kong with a passion for human rights law, Marcus, a former social worker pursuing a second career in child advocacy, and of course, his roommate Alex, who despite their initial awkwardness, turned out to be a loyal friend with a dry sense of humor. Together, they formed a study group, spending long hours in the library poring over cases and debating legal theories. These discussions often extended beyond their coursework, touching on issues of social justice and the role of law in shaping society. One chilly October evening, as they were walking back from a late-night study session, Marcus turned to Ethan. "You know, man, the way you connect legal concepts to real-life situations, it's impressive. Have you thought about joining the Harvard Legal Aid Bureau?" Ethan's interest was piqued. The Bureau, he learned, was a student-run organization that provided free legal services to low-income clients in the Boston area. It seemed like the perfect way to continue the kind of work he had started in the youth court program. After a rigorous application process, Ethan was accepted into the Bureau. His first case involved helping a single mother fight an unjust eviction. As he pored over landlord-tenant laws and prepared arguments, Ethan felt a sense of purpose that went beyond academic achievement. The day of the hearing arrived, and Ethan found himself standing before a judge, advocating for his client. His voice shook slightly at first, but as he presented the facts of the case, he felt his confidence grow. He thought of Judge Martinez and her calm authority, channeling that energy into his own demeanor. When the judge ruled in favor of his client, Ethan felt a rush of exhilaration. This, he realized, was why he wanted to become a lawyer, to make a tangible difference in people's lives. As the fall semester drew to a close, Ethan found himself reflecting on how much he had grown in just a few short months. He was excelling in his classes, making meaningful contributions through the Legal Aid Bureau, and forming friendships that he knew would last a lifetime. Yet, amid the excitement of his new life, Ethan never forgot where he came from. Every Sunday, without fail, he called his mother, sharing his experiences and listening to updates about her growing business. He exchanged regular emails with Mr. Callahan, who always had a gruff word of encouragement to share. And despite the distance, his relationship with Zoe continued to deepen, their conversations about their respective passions for law and journalism growing richer with each passing week. One crisp December afternoon, as Ethan was crossing Harvard Yard, his phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. "Got an internship with the Boston Globe for next summer. We'll be in the same city again." A wide grin spread across Ethan's face as he typed back his congratulations. The future stretched out before him, full of promise and possibility. He knew there would be challenges ahead, rigorous exams, complex legal cases, and the ongoing balancing act of his personal and academic lives. But as he looked up at the historic buildings around him, Ethan felt ready to face whatever came his way. From the boy who had once stolen an apple out of desperation, to the young man now walking confidently across an Ivy League campus, Ethan's journey was a testament to the power of second chances, hard work, and unwavering support. And this, he knew, was only the beginning. As the years at Harvard Law School unfolded, Ethan found himself navigating an increasingly complex world of legal theory, practical application, and personal growth. Each semester brought new challenges and opportunities, pushing him to expand his understanding of the law and its impact on society. By his second year, Ethan had established himself as a standout student, not just for his academic prowess, but for his unique perspective and unwavering commitment to social justice. His experiences at the Legal Aid Bureau had only deepened his resolve to use the law as a tool for positive change. One particularly memorable case involved a group of immigrant workers facing exploitation by their employer. As Ethan delved into labor laws and immigration policies, he couldn't help but think of his own mother's struggles as a seamstress. The case consumed him, leading to late nights in the library and intense strategy sessions with his fellow student advocates. The day of the trial arrived, and Ethan found himself standing before a packed courtroom. As he presented his arguments, he felt a sense of clarity and purpose that he had never experienced before. His voice rang out strong and clear as he fought for the rights of those who had been silenced. When the judge ruled in favor of the workers, the courtroom erupted in cheers. Ethan turned to see his clients, tears of joy and relief streaming down their faces. In that moment, he knew without a doubt that he had chosen the right path. As news of the case spread, Ethan found himself thrust into the spotlight. Local news outlets wanted to interview the young law student who had taken on a powerful corporation and won. While the attention was flattering, Ethan remained grounded, always reminding himself and others of the team effort involved and the courage of the workers who had come forward. Amidst the whirlwind of his growing legal career, Ethan's personal life was also evolving. His relationship with Zoe had deepened over the years, despite the challenges of long-distance romance. Her internship at the Boston Globe had turned into a full-time position, and they reveled in finally being in the same city again. One crisp autumn evening, as they strolled hand in hand through the public garden, Zoe turned to Ethan with excitement in her eyes. "I've been offered a chance to cover a series of stories on immigration reform," she said. "It's a big opportunity, but it would mean spending 6 months traveling across the country." Ethan felt a mix of emotions, pride in Zoe's accomplishments, excitement for her opportunity, and a twinge of sadness at the thought of being apart again. But he knew how important this was to her. "You have to take it," he said, pulling her close. "We'll make it work." As Zoe embarked on her journalistic adventure, Ethan threw himself even more intensely into his studies and advocacy work. He took on additional cases at the Legal Aid Bureau, focusing particularly on issues affecting immigrant communities and at-risk youth. It was during this time that Ethan received an unexpected call from Mr. Callahan. The gruff old market owner's voice was uncharacteristically soft as he explained that he had been diagnosed with a serious illness. "I'm not one for sentimentality, kid," he said, "but I wanted you to know, you've made me proud." The news hit Ethan hard. He arranged to take a weekend off from his studies to return to Boston and visit Mr. Callahan. As they sat in the hospital room, reminiscing about Ethan's early days at the market, Ethan was struck by how much this man had influenced his life's trajectory. "I've been thinking," Mr. Callahan said, his voice weak but his eyes still sharp. "The market. I want you to have it." Ethan was stunned. "Mr. Callahan, I don't know what to say. I'm honored, but I'm not sure I'm the right person to run a business." The old man chuckled. "Who said anything about you running it? I want you to use it. Turn it into something that can help the community. A legal aid center, a youth program, whatever you think is best. You've got the smarts and the heart to make it work." Overwhelmed with emotion, Ethan could only nod, grasping Mr. Callahan's hand in silent gratitude. Returning to Harvard with a heavy heart but a renewed sense of purpose, Ethan began to formulate plans for the market space. He reached out to his network of friends and mentors, including Judge Martinez, to discuss the possibility of creating a community legal center. As his final year of law school approached, Ethan found himself at another crossroads. Job offers were rolling in from prestigious law firms, promising high salaries and fast-track careers. Yet, the idea of the community center tugged at his heart. During a late-night phone call with his mother, Ethan voiced his dilemma. Sarah listened patiently, then said, "Ethan, remember when you first told me you wanted to become a lawyer? You said you wanted to help people like us. Don't lose sight of that dream." Her words resonated deeply, helping to clarify Ethan's path forward. He made the decision to turn down the corporate offers and instead focus on establishing the community legal center in Mr. Callahan's old market space. The final months of law school flew by in a blur of exams, bar prep, and planning for the future. Ethan's graduation day dawned bright and clear, the Harvard yard filled with proud families and beaming graduates. As Ethan accepted his diploma, his eyes scanned the crowd, finding his mother's beaming face. Sarah stood tall, tears of joy streaming down her cheeks, the struggles of their past replaced by immense pride in the present. Next to her sat Mr. Callahan in a wheelchair, looking frail but his eyes twinkling with their usual mischief. Judge Martinez was there too, along with Zoe, who had returned from her assignment just in time for the ceremony. As the graduates tossed their caps into the air, Ethan felt a surge of emotion. He had come so far from that desperate boy in the market, yet in many ways, he was still the same, driven by a desire to make a difference, to repay the faith that others had placed in him, and to create a world where everyone had a fair chance at justice. With his law degree in hand and a clear vision for the future, Ethan Reeves stood ready to embark on the next chapter of his journey, one that would bring him full circle, back to the community where his story began, armed with the knowledge, experience, and determination to make a lasting difference. The old market building stood transformed, its weathered exterior now adorned with a freshly painted sign, Callahan Community Legal Center. Ethan Reeves stood before it, keys in hand, marveling at how life had brought him back to where his journey began. Inside, a small team of dedicated lawyers and volunteers bustled about, preparing for the center's grand opening. Ethan had handpicked each member, ensuring they shared his vision of accessible justice for all. As he walked through the space, memories flooded back, of long days stacking produce, of Mr. Callahan's gruff wisdom, of the desperation that had once driven him to steal. Now, those same shelves held law books and informational pamphlets. The old cash register had been replaced by a reception desk where clients would be welcomed with dignity and respect. The sound of the door chiming interrupted his reverie. Sarah entered, her eyes widening as she took in the transformed space. "Oh, Ethan," she breathed, "it's wonderful." Ethan enveloped his mother in a tight hug. "I couldn't have done it without you, Mom. Without everything you taught me." As they prepared for the ribbon-cutting ceremony, familiar faces began to arrive. Judge Martinez, her hair now streaked with gray, beamed with pride. Zoe, notepad in hand, ready to cover the event for the Boston Globe. Even some of Ethan's old Harvard classmates had come to show their support. Mr. Callahan, too frail now to leave the hospital, was present in spirit, his photo hanging prominently on the wall alongside the center's mission statement. As Ethan addressed the gathered crowd, his voice rang out clear and strong. "This center stands as a testament to the power of second chances and the importance of community. Here, we will fight for those who have been overlooked, offer hope to those who have lost it, and work tirelessly to ensure that justice is not a privilege, but a right for all." The applause that followed was thunderous, but for Ethan, the most poignant moment came later. A young boy, no older than Ethan had been when he first started working at the market, approached him shyly. "Mr. Reeves," the boy asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I heard you help kids like me. Kids who've made mistakes." Ethan knelt down to meet the boy's eyes. "That's right. And do you know what? Everyone makes mistakes. What matters is what we do next. How about we talk about how we can help you?" As Ethan led the boy and his mother to a private consultation room, he felt a profound sense of fulfillment. He had come full circle, now able to offer the kind of support and guidance he had once so desperately needed. The Callahan Community Legal Center quickly became a beacon of hope in the neighborhood. Ethan worked tirelessly, often burning the midnight oil to tackle complex cases. But unlike the grueling hours of his corporate internships, this work filled him with purpose and joy. Months flew by, marked by small victories and challenging setbacks. Ethan's reputation grew, not just as a skilled lawyer, but as a compassionate advocate for the community. He never forgot the lessons of his past, the value of hard work, the importance of integrity, and the power of believing in someone's potential. On the center's first anniversary, as Ethan locked up after a long day, he paused to look at Mr. Callahan's photo. "We're making a difference, old man," he said softly. "Just like you always did." Walking home through the familiar streets, Ethan reflected on his journey. From a desperate boy stealing an apple to a respected lawyer giving back to his community, he had traveled a long and winding road. But with the unwavering support of his mother, the guidance of mentors like Mr. Callahan and Judge Martinez, and his own determination, he had transformed not just his own life, but the lives of countless others. As he reached the small apartment he still shared with Sarah, chosen for its proximity to the center rather than any luxurious law firm's salary, Ethan felt a deep sense of contentment. He had found his true calling, turning the challenges of his past into a force for good in the present. The future stretched out before him, full of possibilities and opportunities to make a difference. And Ethan Reeves was ready to face it all, one case, one life, one small act of justice at a time.